in some ways, those practices become so nourishing to us, like a heart hold or a belly breath, or even just, a box breath, all the things that we can do to regulate in the moment. When you practice them regularly, they almost become something that you crave.
Gabrielle Bernstein, a role model for spiritual seekers.
Our subconscious prefers the familiarity of our habit. When we try to change our life from top to bottom, as a lot of us do, from a well-intentioned, oftentimes deep, dark hole where we can't imagine life going on the same. So, we might make an intention or a commitment to change life, to start with, 5 new habits starting tomorrow. And that, because any new direction, any new choice is going to register to our subconscious mind as unfamiliar. And according to our subconscious mind, in that uncertainty of the unfamiliar could be something that's threatening, that's almost worse than the habit and pattern I'm familiar with, for lack of better words. So there's value, and that's a reason why then we seek to stay. So to speak to your point, it is actually through the gradual, because what we're looking to do is consistently keep these new small promises, understanding that any new gesture, anything new we do will feel uncomfortable. So of course, if we lay on 5 new discomforts starting tomorrow, then chances are we're going to overwhelm our system and be right back in those old habits.
I love exactly what you're saying, because in my language, as having been trained in IFS, we need to honor the protector parts, the habits that have been really, really, really repeated and built up for decades and decades as for what they are in the moment, right? So it's like, if you have a controlling pattern and you just immediately stop controlling, you're going to relapse. If you're an alcoholic and you just decide to white knuckle it, you're going to relapse, because that pattern actually is a form of protection. And this actually brings me to such a big topic, which is the topic of shame. And in your book, you have such a beautiful sort of analysis of shame. And you write, feeling shamed is a threatening, fearful experience. Without realizing it, every time we experience shame, it sends the message that I am not safe to the nervous system. That threat ignites a sympathetic charge that can be more than our nervous system can tolerate. At this point, the parasympathetic nervous system tries to contain the charge. This can present like a freeze response, but underneath that freeze resides a tremendous amount of emotional energy in the form of fear, vulnerability, defensiveness, and sadness. What I love about this, just to unpack it, is that we have this shame that's so impermissible. And then we have this nervous system response, right? That threat ignites a sympathetic charge, and it can be more than our nervous system can handle. So we're charging, and it's almost like we truncate the charge, right? We like push it down, and the parasympathetic nervous system is trying to contain it. And that can put us into a frozen place. And frozen also in these forms of protection, right? Frozen is a form of protection, or all the ways that we try to numb that charge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you're hitting on here, and what this is really illustrating, is the reality that we all, regardless of how connected we are or not to it, live as energy in an energetic body. And to really simplify what emotions are, of course, they complicate our life for many of us, though emotions, if we really boil them down in their simplest form, emotions are sensations that happen in our body. And they're actually incredibly valuable sensations, because they're our body's energy interacting with our environment. And the sensations that we then feel at this point of interaction give us information, namely around, is this a safe environment for me that I can proceed, expand, settle into, receive, or is there a possible threat? In which case I need to, divert my action and deal with the threat for survival purposes. And the large majority of us, in childhood, when we have these same emotions available to us, yet we are in a complete state of dependency. Our nervous system in particular, and I'm sure, maybe many listeners have heard human nervous systems, or humans being referred to as interpersonal creatures, or sometimes the language is wired to connect. All of this, again, is really simplifying or highlighting the fact that our nervous system is always seeking to co-regulate with our environment around us. And in infancy, when we are incredibly dysregulated or incredibly overwhelmed and dependent, I should say, we become dysregulated, overwhelmed, and then we need someone to help us. And the large majority of us who didn't have an attuned caregiver, right, who didn't have someone to show up when we were distressed, crying out, and to identify or explore with us what need we were having. Are we hungry? Are we tired? Are we upset or distressed, having an agitated emotion? And then help bring us back into safety. When that didn't happen consistently, we go into a survival mode. We adapt. We do all of these. Our nervous system finds a way to deal with that overwhelm. So for me, what that looked like, as I think very similarly it did for you, we detach from our body, we dissociate, we might numb, right, through behaviors, endless achievement or substance use or many other different things. Again, going back to the reality that our feelings, just because we're suppressing them, we're denying them, we're not tending to them, doesn't mean that they aren't there. Right. So feelings and emotions get constricted in us. And sometimes that constriction is our best attempt at keeping ourselves safe. If we can minimize the emotional impact or the felt emotional impact, right? Because I'm away on my spaceship, now I feel a bit safer to proceed. Again, doesn't mean that that emotional charge still isn't present. And it is present for a lot of us.
And it shows up in subconscious ways. It shows up in our jaw. It shows up in our hips. It shows up in our gastro issues, migraines, sleep issues, all of it. Simply just witnessing the habits or patterns, or in my case, I call them parts as an IFS. And so just seeing these protective parts of ourselves that are in these habitual ways that may be too extreme. Well, my last question is related to the work, How to Do the Work, which is Nicole's book. And I actually love this subtitle: Recognize Your Patterns, Heal from Your Past, Create Yourself. I just love clear subtitles so much. So what I want to ask is, right now, there's a shitload of triggers, right? So there's like reproductive health being completely taken from us, and the fear of, it's just the trigger around being a woman and not having rights, right? The triggers of war, if you have that sort of, for me, I can speak like the ancestral story of the Holocaust and then seeing what's happening in the Ukraine. If the triggers of COVID, there's just so many, there always have been, but they're very heightened and elevated, particularly right now. What would be the best piece of advice from the book, or just in general, that someone could do, how to do the work with their triggers in this time that we're living in? Something that would be a simple takeaway for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. And very interestingly, this kind of comes full circle to understand that when we're having a trigger or an emotion, right? When we're saying we're triggered, usually we're having an emotion. We feel, whatever it is, we feel some version of upset. That emotion, just like I described them, right? They're based in our body. They belong to us, right? The emotion we're having, yes, it's in connection to an event that's happening, something someone said, did, or didn't do. Though when the emotion's happening in our body and when we're activated, that's actually information for us. That indicates that there is something deeper that's going on. There is a feeling, a similar experience, right, that resulted in a deeper feeling that we've revisited time and time again. And typically then the way we react from the trigger becomes very habitual as well. We tend to do the same sort of thing. Yeah. So like you were saying earlier, follow the behavioral pattern. When I'm yelling and screaming, when I'm dissociating, that's a time to kind of come to the awareness that, oh, I've been triggered. Something's happening. So the first thing that I want to offer listeners is the suggestion to become curious around our triggers. As overwhelming as they might be, again, they contain valuable information. They are indicating some degree of how we're experiencing our environment. And typically when we're triggered, they're indicating that we're perceiving something as unsafe. Now, again, that can allow us to explore for ourselves. What is it? What are we feeling? What's feeling unsafe? However, there's another important suggestion that I want to offer outside of the curiosity, because I think that's an action, and like the observation, like we've been talking about, the witnessing, the self-understanding. And let's be honest, that goes so far because we're still triggered. Our body is still reacting, and we're
sometimes when you're in that trigger, you can't
completely
even be
dissociated
curious.
And, dysregulated and uncomfortable. And maybe we're actually causing harm to ourselves or the environment around us. So as important as the insight piece is, and very interestingly, we've been talking about the two stages of change, at least as I see it. Insight, kind of that's been peppered all through our conversation. Awareness, being this conscious witness. So again, all of this applies when we're activated, when we're triggered, really being curious, exploring what is coming up. It is something deeper. And then allowing us the second stage of changing as well, which is beginning to embody a new choice, to do something different in that moment. And the best new choice that we can set, or the most foundational, I should say, because it is foundational new choice, is creating a new habit of finding safety in that moment. So for some of us, that might be through tuning into our breath, learning how to harness the intentional act of breathing in a calm way. I love to shout out the deep belly breath because it's something we can do anytime without anyone even noticing. Learning how to breathe really deeply and calmly and evenly from your belly will help activate that parasympathetic nervous system. For others, it might be really tuning into our senses, right? Naming things in the environment, focusing on what can I touch? What can I taste? Maybe we even have an object that helps us feel safe that we can, or maybe it's our pet. Pets can be incredibly regulating. Right. I shout out to Jimmy Blue, right?
Jimmy Blue.
Maybe it's something then that we can help us along the way find safety. And I say that's foundational because without that safety, without that ability to be in that parasympathetic state, we can't think of new things. We have no access. We're actually in an emotional part of our brain that is so hardwired that this is why, back to those clients that I would see week after week coming in with like, oh, I did it again. Because when you did it again, you had no access to that conscious part of your brain to remind you that you have this very beautiful tool to create safety. So we really need to practice. This is my diatribe of getting to the final suggestion. So we have curiosity, we have learning how to regulate our body, and then we have the suggestion that I make that everyone loves to hate, practicing so consistently outside of those moments when you really need it, so that when that moment happens, you can help yourself. You can help yourself remember this beautiful new tool you have. And I'm speaking to all of us who, like myself, right? We don't have the consistent habit of maybe breath work or of conscious grounding through our senses, so that we're really doing ourselves a disservice. We're asking ourselves to remember something in a very emotional, dysregulated time that's going to be near impossible. So the more we practice, the more confident we then get, so that little by little we can learn how to regulate ourselves before the cap blows off.
Yeah. And the more sense of proof that we have that it works in a sense. And also in some ways, those practices become so nourishing to us, like a heart hold or a belly breath, or even just, a box breath. All the things that we can do to regulate in the moment become so, when you practice them regularly, they almost become something that you crave. I found myself at times just being like, the second I put on binaural music and do a heart hold, my whole system is just like, thank you. It's like getting a massage. And so I really want to emphasize that you have made such a commitment to us to guide us with this very easy to digest psychological lexicon, for giving us the work and how to do the work, and being our cheerleader truly for our own personal well-being. It's just so beautiful to witness. And I'm also really proud of you for kind of going against the grain in that clinical world.
Well, thank you. And it truly, Gabby, was my own journey, like, to speak to your point, after giving yourself those heart holds or those belly breaths, you crave it. It really does take practicing and giving yourself that new experience to even be able to have the contrast. Some of us don't even have the idea that there's change possible. And the reason why I'm so impassioned about the work that I do and so committed to, speaking in understandable ways and giving these tools outside of even, buying the book or being a member for free, accessible across all of my platforms, is coming from that, my own journey of change, my own journey of disbelief, where I began, didn't think any of these things were possible. Imagined I was just going to continue to be a stressed out, disconnected, unfulfilled person for the rest of my life. It was really until I walked this path and I was my own proof, like you said. And it really does take becoming our own proof, creating small changes along the way that you can tune back in. And now you give yourself a choice. When I do these things, I feel this way. When I don't do these things, I feel this way. Now you're empowering yourself with choice. And that's why I'll remain committed to you speaking about my journey, to speaking about these tools, and to hopefully continuing to do so in a way that really does allow anyone, wherever you are, access to not only this information, but to the how to cross that bridge, to actually embody change. Because I believe this is how we change as a collective. I think this is how our systems change. I think we really change as the humans that inhabit them become a whole, connected, and cooperative being that I think we all are at our core.
Couldn't agree more. I'll close out with this, my favorite AA slogan. It works if you work it. and keep working it, people. Thank you for being here on Dear Gabby. Thank you, my friend Nicole. I adore you.
Thank you.
And everybody go follow the holistic psychologist and just get the wisdom, get the book, How to Do the Work. Follow Nicole. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I adore you. If you like this video and you want to get more Gabby, check out the next one right over here.